Okay, so this is a sermon I'm not very excited about preaching because it has this particular text that was read today by Kathy, which is a tough text about the sun and the moon and signs and earth shaking and everything falling apart at the seams, and the Son of Man returning on a cloud. So, I think I'm too old to avoid things anymore. So I couldn't avoid this particular text today. So let me ask you a question. What is it that holds things together when everything is falling apart? When people are shooting folks in Colorado and when all manner of terrorism is happening around the world, what is it that actually holds us together? I have my thoughts and opinions, and I'm sure you have yours too. I would just say to you that my belief is that what holds us together is the deep sacred connections in all of creation. For example, you have that loaf of bread that's in your cupboard. Think how many people that loaf of bread connects you to. There's the people who sold the seed to the farmer to plant it in the ground. There's the farmer that planted it. There's the harvesting of that wheat. And then it gets carried off to a mill to be ground into flour, and then it gets packaged up, and then it's taken to the bakery somewhere, and you've got bakers baking it into bread, and then it gets wrapped up into some kind of plasticky, cellophane-y thing, and it gets put in a case and tossed into a truck, and you have a truck driver who's driving it and delivering it to grocery stores. Lo and behold, they go to Geisler's, and there's somebody at Geisler's, an employee who takes it and stacks it on the shelf, and then you come down the aisle and you go, oh, I think I want that loaf of bread, and you toss it into your cart. And then you go out and you pay for it, and there's a person behind the counter that you're having to give money to in order to get this bread to your home. And then you get home, and maybe you take the bread and you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for your kid to put in their lunch to go to school. And then your kid goes to school and at lunchtime opens it up and sees in this little plastic bag that there's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and notices there's a kid next door with a cheese stick and barters it for the cheese stick, and bread doesn't do him any good at all. You get the idea, right? We are connected so deeply to so many people. Some are more obvious than others, but the connections are there nonetheless. And then something like Paris happens, terror. And all of a sudden, it feels like we're cut off from all connections. All of a sudden, it feels like any car backfiring is a bomb, and we want to duck for cover. And we see people who are not the norm that is here in our nation, and because they're different, they have different clothes, or they speak a different language, or they have different color skin, and immediately they become suspect because we're in this hyper kind of sensitivity to things that might happen. And maybe they look like we imagine terrorists might look like. And so we keep ourselves away from them, or worse. Terror is an amazing thing. It is violence that is meant to ignite our amygdala, that little part of our brain that goes fight or flight. And it is meant to traumatize us in such a way that we become a society of PTSD folks. We become a society of post-traumatic stress syndrome. So that when one happens, we remember another that happened earlier, and it multiplies. It's layered on itself. Terrorism is a thing of the mind. We're true Americans in our family. That means the day after Christmas or the day after Thanksgiving, you go to a movie. And we did. And I walked into the movie theater with my 2 grandsons. And out of nowhere, this thought pops into my head. If somebody walks into the theater with a weapon, I'm going to lay on top of my grandkids. The movie we ended up seeing was a Full House, and so the rest of my group went in ahead of time, and they had saved for me this one seat that is that seat that when you walk into where all the theater seats are, it's kind of in the middle. It's only one standing right at the entrance, and Sally was back further, and she said that she thought, oh, gee, Denny's in that one seat right at the entrance. If somebody walks in with a weapon, he'll be the first to go. You know, they say don't be afraid, but these are visceral feelings. You don't control them. They just happen. The amygdala does its work as if, you know, we were in a jungle somewhere and a tiger were leaping out at us and about to do us in. But of course, the amygdala is not the only part of our brain. Our brain also has the frontal lobe. I mistyped that over the weekend as I was putting this sermon together, and I put a V in instead of the B. Frontal love. You know, what you can get out of a mistake, right? Well, we'll come back to that in a minute. The world in which this text was written was like the world that we're talking about today. It was written about 8 years after the armies of Rome plowed over Jerusalem and Israel and did them in. Made people flee and run and hide in fear. And then, in order to give some comfort to those folks who still remained afterwards, this kind of chapter was written that is written in Luke here. It's a part of a kind of literature called apocalyptic literature. That's a seminary word. Nobody else uses it, except for movies sometimes. And it means, apocalyptic means pulling back the curtain to reveal what's going to happen at the very end of all things. And so there's this literature in the Bible that is talking about the end of all things. But its purpose is meant to give comfort to those people who are in that historical situation. And if you take it literally, you end up in this really crazy place. Like people in the 19th century who believed this literally a sect of Christianity, and they had a particular date that they thought was predicted when the Son of Man would return on a cloud. And so when that day came, they all got up on their rooftops so they'd be closer to the cloud that Jesus was returning on. It happened to be a blue sky, cloudless kind of day. They all had to come down from their rooftops. Every century since the first century, somebody has predicted that the end would come. And in some of those cases, violence has been used. It doesn't matter because the end is coming, so anything goes. How this apocalyptic theology can be used. In the 70s, they claimed that Russia was the great bear of the north that's in Revelation, which is an apocalyptic book, and that Russia was coming to the south, and that's what the bear was doing, and that meant that Jesus was going to return. And then the other part of the apocalyptic story is when Jesus returns, then all of the bad people are going to be done away with, and all of the good people are going to be gathered in, and they're going to live on for eternity. The weird thing is, this is exactly the kind of apocalyptic theology that the terrorists from ISIS are using. They have a little different format. There are to be 12 caliphates, 12 states in which there will be Islamic rule. And we're in the 8th one right now. And that, if this succeeds or not, really doesn't matter, because at the 12th caliphate, then Allah, God, will come and do the very same thing. God will get rid of all the bad people and bring all the good people in. In fact, they even have Jesus as a part of that scheme, because Jesus is their second greatest prophet, and Jesus is going to slay the anti-Messiah as part of their scheme just before the end, when all the bad people are done in. Okay, so you see why I didn't want to preach this? Yeah. So, just for me, I don't believe any of it. I do not believe in apocalyptic theology. I think it's taking a part of an ancient story and making it the whole thing. And it's not. It served its purpose in the time to comfort people who were in a difficult time. But not for a moment do I think that this is what is intended. So, what do I think? That's why I didn't want to preach this sermon, because I had to figure out what is this thing? What is it that actually holds us together? And I've already told you basically what that is. That is that our deep interconnections with one another hold us together. But like Dawn said, as she was starting the prayer, sometimes we just don't see it. And there's our problem. Sometimes we just do not take the time to pay attention. We don't do the prayer. We don't do the meditation. We don't slow down to take the time and look how that bread in our cupboard connects us to so many people around our nation. And not only that bread, of course, everything else. But not only that, that we are connected in ways that we cannot see. And that we are mystified by. Or maybe you aren't, but I am. So here's one thing I learned this week. I get a kick out of these kinds of things. You may or may not. The Amazon jungles have soil that does not create nearly enough nutrients to support it. If it had to live on the nutrients in its own soil, it would die just within a number of decades. This is the Amazon, which is as large as the continental United States. Now, somebody in 2006 did some research and discovered that they get nutrients from Africa. What? Yes, from Africa. Dust blows up and over the Atlantic Ocean and comes over into the Amazon, and the nutrients from that dust gives the nourishment for the Amazon jungle to grow. And as you know, the jungle in the Amazon is essential for the climate of the entire globe. But there was a question. There was not enough nutrients to support the Amazon. Somebody went and did some more research. In fact, there was only 13%. Whoa, hold it, that's wrong. This is where I need my paper now. There were 13 million tons a year coming across as dust. But that wasn't nearly enough. And so more research was done just a few years ago, and what they discovered was there's not 13 million tons a year coming over. There's over 50 million tons of dust, of nutrients that are coming over from Africa to the Amazon jungle to support it and to have it do its job. But here's the other amazing thing they found out. I don't know how they did it. You have to go Google it to see whether or not this is the case. I'm not a scientist, but this is what I read. There is a desert, a small desert, that is 1/3 the size of the state of Florida. 1/3 the size of the state of Florida, and it gives nutrients to the tune of 50 million tons from that desert to the Amazon jungle. Okay, why are you going on about this, Denny? It's a long time for a little science question. The answer is this: because it shows how deeply interconnected we are in ways that we could not even imagine or make up. Who would ever believe it if you made it up? Oh yeah, like that would happen. No. This is the deep interconnection. And there is where my hope is. But you have to see it. You have to see it. You have to be aware of how it's at work in your own life. I mean, this is what Luke was trying to get at. You see, today's text is only part of the story. It begins with this other marvelous story. When Caesar was running the Roman Empire and Quirinius was governor, and these great people of power, and a little baby came of questionable parenting, and this little baby was said to represent a power greater than the power of Rome in all its terror and military might. How do you think we hold together when everything is falling apart? It does not happen by guns and bombs and locked doors. Not that we don't need those things, and not that we don't need to make decisions about how we will keep ourselves safe and all of that. We do, and everybody makes different decisions. But those things, if they are left to go to 100% security, do you realize what kind of a world we would live in? We would be locked down. We would not be able to walk about freely. So let's settle for 85%. I don't know if that's how free we are or not, but if we go for 100%, we're all closed in. But this little baby, the message that this baby brings, and Luke tells us, is that to love God and to love neighbor is the most powerful force on the planet. There is no way to be more secure than loving God and loving your neighbor. There is no way to be more secure than that. Oh, you can build up whatever walls you want. But in the end, the security is, oh, we love each other. Oh, yes, we care for each other. I'm not sure who this person is, but I know we're connected and we have a deep love for one another. This is the security that comes from our faith. This is the security that comes from our hearts. This is the security that each of us can live in and feel. This is what holds us together when everything is falling apart.